All right, welcome everybody to a Clean Facts Know-How webinar that I'm particularly excited for. The Consumer Tech Effect, Modern Learners, How Changing Digital Preferences Are Rapidly Disrupting Training Norms. And it took everything in me not to just call this webinar Kids These Days, but we're talking about kids these days, specifically young workers entering the field and their expectations for how you deliver good content, how you train them, the way their brains work. You would be shocked at how much that can change over the course of 10, 15 years. And so when you entered the industry as the attendee of this webinar, your experience may have been very different than the people that are joining your company in August of 2025. So I'm really excited to get into this discussion. Please, everyone, let us know where you're tuning in from. We want to see all the geographical reach of this conversation. And it's always somewhat encouraging to know that there's people all around North America that have the same problems as you do. And so we're excited to get into it. We've also have two really, really talented panelists joining us today. Leighton Healy, so committed to understanding kids these days that he just got back from having another one. Leighton, welcome back. Hope your daughter's doing well.
Yeah, she's doing well, and she's got big, two small big brothers who
Hmm.
are making sure that no one messes with her. Happy to be here.
Big brothers are the best. I was just telling Travis about
Yeah,
That's right. That's
yeah,
funny. Oh, totally. And hey, Melissa Hastings as well joining us, Restoration One, but long, long tenure in the restoration industry, second generation in the restoration industry. Melissa, I really appreciate you joining us today.
Absolutely. I'm excited to be here. Thanks,
Yeah,
guys.
this is going to be great. So why don't we start off? I want to level set a little bit. I want to give some introductions, make sure everyone knows your background. Leighton, I'll throw it to you first. Why don't you just give us high level where you're tuning in from and why you're so passionate about training? Of all the things you could dedicate your life to, why has training been such a consistent theme and good quality training for today's workers?
So my background, I have had a variety of experiences building, scaling, leading different people-powered companies. And so those have ranged from trades-based businesses where it was me and a multitude of crews, or being part of a team where we had, a network of hundreds of locations with thousands of workers. And so I've just over the years, I have had a tremendous amount of experience being able to lead organizations that are very, very much people organizations. So when we think about the advent of AI and whatnot, some industries are being extremely disrupted. Lots of their workforces are being replaced. My focus and my passion has always been with industries where they have been and they will be very people-centric in how they deliver their services or products for decades to come. Why am I passionate about training? I would say because I'm an optimist and a realist when it comes to achieving outcomes through teams. I'm an optimist in that I just have had the pleasure of just seeing people grow within a healthy learning environment, a culture that really favors, a commitment to learning and development. And so I've just seen people grow, people who started as a technician, now as a senior executive in an organization, an individual that everyone thought, was really can I hit their ceiling? And now she's managing an entire department. And so I've witnessed the fruit of great training. And then I'm also a realist. I'm just very realistic that the incoming workforce, sometimes I joke and I say it's kind of the rise of the unhandy generation. Not a lot of young people growing up today with parents with tool sheds, or, head out to the farm, or, go work, crank wrenches with Uncle Nick. That's becoming more and more uncommon. And so in many ways, the industries that we're really passionate about, they need skilled labor. And so the starting point, in the past, even when I built my companies in trades and whatnot, oftentimes you're starting with labor who are coming over from a different service industry, coming over from a different trade. Now, you're really starting. Sometimes I like to say, you're really starting with a workforce who are still in the locker room. They're not even on the field yet. And so training is so paramount. And when you consider how retention rates just create this very finite window of time by which employers have to be able to get people up to speed and get them to contributing in productive to standard work. I just think that companies that can build their talent have and will continue to have an outsized advantage. And so I'm very passionate about it.
Yeah. Thanks, Layton. You think training has always been important since we've tried to, put pyramids together. But in a world where so many people are entering the workforce with less experience than ever before, less experience holding a hammer, wearing a tool belt, anything like that, the need for good, high quality training that works for today's worker, like you said, Layton, couldn't be more important. Melissa, for those unfamiliar with your background, give us a high level snapshot and why you're so passionate about training.
Sure. I'm not going to tell you the year I got started because I don't want to age myself on the internet, but I am a second generation restorer. I worked very closely with my father and my brothers growing up in the carpet cleaning and restoration world. We were one of the first franchises in a still known and well-established franchise brand. And we're in that franchise network for 30 years before my dad decided to retire. My brother decided to buy the business from him, and then I transitioned over to the HQ support office. So I have I've been a part of everything from cleaning carpet, tearing out carpet, extraction, doing the work, managing the crews, the office, etc. I've had my hand in a little bit of everything. And I'd say over the years, the really fun part about training is getting to develop others to be successful in life and reach their desired level of success. For me, that's an extremely fulfilling part about who I am, and that's where I feel the most valuable is helping people understand that this industry is more than just going out and extracting water and plugging in some dehumidifiers. It's really about helping people during their time of chaos. It's about bringing them a sense of calm when their life has been disturbed and helping them protect what is most likely their most important investment in their lifetime. By helping restore their home and their valuables and bring that safe space back into a reality for them. So I love getting to be a part of that journey, like Leighton said, from watching a technician become a crew chief into an ops manager, and just showing people that there is a really long-term sustainable opportunity in this industry where you can truly become an expert outside of just the technical piece, but also the customer service side, and becoming a more well-rounded professional in the industry from a development standpoint.
Yeah. A common thread that I hear in both of your answers is helping people reach their potential. Sometimes potential they didn't even recognize they had in themselves. And
Yeah.
my assumption is in the comments, there's people watching either live or later on YouTube. A lot of them would resonate with that as well. Hey, I'm passionate about this because I love to help people hit their potential. So let's start by talking about some of the roadblocks to hitting that potential that exists now that didn't necessarily exist 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 30 years ago when we got into the industry. And so I want to help Melissa. You've got the best framing for this, but in Leighton, I'll throw it to you after to round out this perspective. Help me compare the training environment today compared to maybe like 20 years ago, right? A lot of people watching this, maybe they've been in the industry for a decade or two, and it's so easy just to put our own experience on the experience of today's young workers. And
Sure.
that would be an unwise decision just because so much has changed. So help paint the picture 20 years ago compared to today. Melissa, what's changed?
Um, well, a lot. I mean, we've transitioned out of the 4-inch binders with, typewritten um, early 90s Times New Roman font on a page that looked like someone literally sit down and had to type it out, along with VHS tapes. I remember that when I was a little girl, I'd sit in my dad's office and I would put in the tapes and I would watch them, and I felt so special because I knew the people in the videos because those were our support staff at our franchisor. And so I was like, oh man, I'm learning from like these famous people like Jack White and people who've been in the industry forever. So it was VHS tapes, and you would sit there and you would watch the people, on the tapes do carpet cleaning or stretching or carpet dyeing, and they would teach you all the things. And then you would just go out and ride along with somebody in a truck and let them show you how to do what you saw in the video. And then over time, you would just continue to learn until you had an opportunity to go to a more formal class, which I've literally seen some of these classes taught on like the old school projectors with the clear, transparent sheets that you throw up on the wall. And now our training is so, so much more available at our fingertips, and it's in the right manner or in the right platform, it's more easily digestible. I think back in the day, the study behind the psychology of how people learn wasn't as prevalent as it is now. And so I can see where a lot of people could have struggled if a video or an audio version of training wasn't really what was conducive to their learning style. And they were forced to read the 4-inch binder and then watch, you know, bad quality videos, I'm sure, and then try to have to learn all of that in one manner versus now we have people who can learn in different languages if they're a dual language speaker. We've got we've got textbook learning, we've got ebook learning, we've got videos, we've got walkthroughs. We've got the technology that gives us training at our fingertips so we can literally like go take a break in the truck and look something up really quick. That way our customer doesn't see us panicking or trying to fumble for what we need. We have a way to become more confident and show up with those skills on the job site now. And so it's just at your fingertips in multiple ways that speak to multiple learners.
Awesome. So good. I totally forgot about how important it was to be kind and rewind those old VHS tapes. That was a good throwback.
That's right.
Leighton, how about yourself? What would you round out with that? What are some of the biggest shifts or changes that we've seen happen over the last decade or two when it comes to training and equipping young workers?
Well, just to build on what Melissa's saying, and Melissa, great points, and even just a great illustrated picture, and it brings to mind memories that I certainly have as well. Um, let's go back 20 years. Okay, so it was 2005, right? 2005. You know, for example, let's call it digital resources like learning management systems and whatnot had still been around for, let's call it in the popular market for still probably about 25 years by that point. You know, really pioneers like D2L and Blackboard and some of these tools had really, gone deep into higher education, and those had started to kind of move into larger, let's call it kind of, blue chip companies, and that kind of trickled down. Traditionally, kind of service industries are later adopters of new technologies, and so, really, while some industries had been running on internal wikis and intranets and learning management systems for, say, 15 years, you started to see industries, franchising is a good example where it made sense. What they had is they had centralized decision making, but execution was distributed. And so we should also think about ways that we can leverage the distribution of our training. And and in many ways, what you saw is kind of a bit of a race for organizations to build out these learning and development teams, really to be in thinking around how do we, we leverage this thing called the cloud, which allows us to have, much more accessibility to our materials, to our documentation and whatnot. And for a large part, what I would say is that two things happened that I think we're experiencing a little bit of a hangover. One is that you had individuals who had a very unique mind for how you design training, stepped into organizations and created learning design. And learning design has, to Melissa's point, has become a very robust and a very respected science and part of the broader organizational dynamic. But one of the challenges that you saw is you had individuals who were really needles in a haystack, who had the ability to think, abstractly through how all this training should be both codified and facilitated. And then oftentimes the training structure began to favor how they prefer to learn and how they prefer to be guided through different resources. And then you started to see just the waves of, in many ways, frustration from low utilization and activation from large workforces. And so then you start to see the statistics come out around low usage rates, around internal company resources, and even in compensated training scenarios, how utilization was just so low. And one of the factors was is that just naturally we look to the individual with that really unique mind to design a learning experience, and naturally they reflect how they would prefer to learn. And when you look at just say, just practically speaking, how crews out in the trucks or out in their vans, how they solve knowledge-based problems at that time in their free time, oftentimes there's a disconnect between these very robust and very formal and very structured learning structures and the way that the learner prefer to learn. And I think that you're seeing that hangover. The second thing is that, you saw a lot of organizations make deep investments to create a base of learning or a base of knowledge, and then they recognize now that the upkeep and the maintenance and keeping that content current has been very laborious, very administratively expensive. And so you have organizations that I think have just created kind of this almost this dynamic between leadership and learning and development that oftentimes has been experienced from leadership and human resources, a department that doesn't directly generate revenue. And so you just start to feel this dynamic where learning and development and HR leaders are kind of like justifying spend, justifying their budgets. And we all know intrinsically it's important to have a healthy, vibrant learning and development. But you just have departments that have sometimes had difficulty putting metrics behind their outputs, and and that just has created this interesting cocktail. So fast forward to today, I'll just say, two things really kind of came around like 2013, 2015 that really, I would say, have just thrown a wrench in a lot of training design. And it looks like this. It looks like this, and it looks like this, right? Which is the advent of the like button to drive
I thought you were trying
algor
to a lighter. I think
yeah.
you're using a lighter or
Yeah,
something.
yeah, yeah. No,
Rolling.
no. It's like, yeah, I'm scrolling. Yeah, exactly. So there's the like button. The like button is representative of personalization and algorithmic curation of knowledge and content, right? So those types of what we call recce systems, recommender systems, and so that became the advent of intelligent systems beginning to personalize content consumption experiences. And we all know that there are some really, ugly layers to that. But the other one is the scroll, right? Just kind of scrolling through it, and today we see it in reels and things like that. And those things have served to inform the consumer of what a knowledge experience could be like, but also it's really done a wrecking on attention spans and retention levels. And so those have been things that, again, that wasn't like anyone intentionally in an L&D department, like a learning and development department, said, how do we just completely eradicate and destroy learning retention rates? But that has been kind of a macro factor that's shown up. So bring us to today. I mean, bring us to today. The Bureau of Labor Statistics tells us year after year after year, within the next couple of years, individuals who are willing and able to do the work in these labor-based industries will represent over 30% of available workers, struggle, to consume training in a language that's not the language they speak at home. And yet we see this advent of these large language model kind of generative AI, agentic AI tools that have entered, yeah, have just entered the scene, and we can talk more about that. So what a time to be in training and development.
What a time to be in training and development. That's what my
Absolutely.
tattoo
And I
says.
remember that transition too. It's funny that you mentioned Blackboard a minute ago, Leighton, because I remember I
Yeah.
was in college and they went from, all the paper stuff. You guys remember the Scantron slips and the blue
Mhm.
folders that you had to break the line with your pencil and you had to write everything out. And
Oh yeah.
that was actually a relief for me because I'm a very like visual, hands-on, interactive learner. Obviously, growing up on a carpet cleaning van with my family. I learned by doing and getting my hands on something. When I was little, I used to take apart my grandpa's fishing reels and put them back together just so I knew how they worked. So very hands-on. So when our college transitioned over to Blackboard learning, it actually helped me transition into kind of the new era of technology that was becoming available during those years. And then I think from there, I did have that good window of time where I got to learn as as society shifted and all of this new technology was coming out and being developed. So I've got to kind of learn as I go with it. And I would definitely say, like when I had my restoration business before, if I had the tools that we have now, my experience as a business owner or a manager probably would have been a little bit smoother, just because of the availability of the information that our technicians and our staff need. So
Yeah.
really, really good point there for the 2000 shift for sure.
I want to keep pulling on this thread of just that technological shift that we've undergone as well. I think if you were to go back 30 years and tell someone in learning and development, hey, 30 years from now, every one of your workers are going to have the most powerful supercomputer you could possibly fathom in their pocket, and every single answer to any question they will ever have will be at their fingertips. I think most people are like, holy smokes, that's incredible. And you're like, oh, and by the way, it's going to obliterate their attention span. So, wait,
Well, do you
what was that?
remember when you do you remember when like movies like what is it, iRobot and Legend and things like that came out like however many years ago? Like that's kind of where we're at now. I mean, we've got that level of artificial intelligence. People are
Hmm.
building robots. We've got Chat GPT that, can actually learn and converse with us. And so there's that's kind of what it feels like now is like, oh my gosh, 20 years ago, that was just a movie. And now it's kind of like coming true. So
Yeah.
it's
And
actually really neat.
totally. And it's incredible. And I think every person on this webinar watching this video can speak to the inherent frustrations of a worker having their device with them at all times. And so, Melissa, I want to throw it to you. How have you thought about how you can harness things like, always online connectivity, the phone in your workers' pockets, the digital way of relaying information? How can you harness the strengths of that without while acknowledging and just reconciling with the weaknesses of all this technology as well?
Sure. I think it's a mix, right? Like it's a combination of what's available at the fingertips, what you're teaching as a leader in the business, and what your company is learning as you scale the organization. And then also just keeping up with the restoration industry as a whole, or any industry really, just keeping up with current trends and things that are happening. And then also not completely removing the human aspect out of it, right? Like we don't want phones and online platforms to replace everything. So I think it's really about creating that balance and making sure that your technicians are aware of the multiple resources that you can offer them and that are available to them versus having them only focus on one or another. So, something that I teach now to our new owners that join our network is, before you become the person who has to answer all the questions, like don't be that bottleneck in your business, right? Like no business owner needs to be the 100% verifiable expert on every subject within our realm of the industry, but empower others to be an expert in something that they feel passionate about, whether it's fire cleaning, contents restoring, water mitigation, mold, whatever. Empower people in your organization to be the expert. And then have your whole team kind of understand like, when you have a question or you need training or you need to learn something, even if it is on the fly, like have you talked to your coworkers about this first? Like have you asked someone that's on the truck with you or have you gone to, a crew chief or a project manager? Then have you tried to self resource on the internet or in the standards or going back to your know-how platform and looking up a video about water mitigation? And then really upper management or upper leadership should kind of be the third stop if they can't get the help they need. But There's so many different avenues now to get the information you do need. You just have to make sure that your people are empowered to access it when they need it and that they understand the process on what to go through before they have to go to like the last resort.
Yeah.
So,
I think it's worth pointing out that there is generational differences when it comes to how people prefer to access that information as well. And so, Leighton, I want to throw it to you and I want to talk about the research that's been done, understanding the difference between Gen X, Millennial, Gen Z. Kiana, thanks for this great question. Shout out Kiana, big Kiana fans, unanimous on this webinar.
yes,
And but
amazing
even
coworker. That's my shout out for Kiana.
big Kiana
She's my
fans here.
best. She's the best.
Uh, but actually, Counter brought up a great point. I am forgetting, despite having a few of them who live with me in my household, that Gen Alpha is now a thing as well. And those are coming up. Those are starting to enter the workforce too. Leighton, how do all these generational differences play into how people like to receive information, how they process information? It probably is tied to the technology they grew up in, but help us understand the lay of the land a little bit if you can, Leighton.
So generationally, one of the things that I am very mindful of is that when an individual says, like if I ask a business owner, I say, do you anticipate that in 5 years you will continue to need frontline technicians? I said, yeah, of course, of course I'll need. Why are you asking me that? Okay, so what would you say is kind of the typical age of individuals in that role? Like, I don't know, 19, 20? Okay, perfect. So, um, my question for you is, where are all the 14 and 15-year-olds right now? Because if in 5 years those individuals are going to be filling your ranks, let's spend some time thinking about, how do we really, in a sense, um, add a layer of, let's call it, uh, continuity to whatever it is that we build and develop. And so when you talk about Gen Alpha, right? Gen Alpha is kind of anybody right now. I think most would agree. Most demographers would say kind of anyone under 18, 19-ish right now is this generation coming into the workforce. And what are the things that really influence them? Now, one of the things I'll just point out, because this is just something that might surprise some of the learners, or some people might say, actually, it's bigger than that. But right now, so much of the technology world, especially the segment of the technology world that accesses their customer base through a mobile device, are really focused on one big word called compute, right? So compute, what is compute? Compute is essentially we've probably become accustomed to this term, a prompt. It used to be you send an email, or you put it in the cloud, or you DM me, right? These are all kind of terminology that we've had to adopt. Well, now we have to now adopt this term called a prompt. A prompt is essentially the input that you give some type of a system like a Grok or a Sora or an Anthropic or a Gemini or a ChatGPT, and you're giving it essentially an activity or a task, and then it's coming back to you. Well, what happens when I give it that prompt and then it pushes out? Well, what it's doing is it's drawing up on resources that are largely hitting these massive technology. We call them these big kind of chip farms that are powered by tools like NVIDIA and stuff like that, and it's drawing on compute. So right now, I saw an announcement yesterday that OpenAI anticipates they'll spend about $3 trillion in their compute ability over the next period of time. I think like 3 to 7 years. So just for reference, I live just outside the Rocky Mountains in Western Canada. Some people are surprised to know that in the northern part of the province of Alberta is the largest industrial investment in the history of the world, right? Nearly $2 trillion of infrastructure that powers this oil and gas superpower that is this, segment of the Canadian landmass called Alberta. People are like, oh, I didn't know that. Well, that was over like 60 years. So, I mean, I'm not, I don't have all the numbers, but rough math, um, 30 to 40% more money than has been invested will be invested in about 80% less time in this thing called a race for compute. Why is Microsoft recommissioning a nuclear power plant to be able to create just the electricity necessary to drive these devices. What does all that mean? That's a lot of information. What does all that mean? What all that means is that the individuals and the organizations that really, in a sense, are going to create some of the most transformational technologies are really focused on, on this whole idea of how do you serve the holder of that device to be able to just have human interactions, human questions, human queries, and really allow the technology to do a lot of the heavy lifting. And so what used to be a difficulty of finding something or a difficulty perhaps providing, a sufficient accuracy in a search query, or the ability for me to be able to have a level of personalization in the information, all of that will go away. And so I would just kind of really just challenge, those kind of listening is that one of the difficulties that I believe learning leaders, and individuals like myself have to kind of consider for is, I often will say if we could just borrow that little flashy device from Men in Black. And if we've all seen that show and it kind of flashes them in the face and they forget what happens and then you can kind of reinform reality. I mean, in many ways, the dynamics have changed so drastically. Technology has changed the landscape of knowledge-based opportunities so drastically that we almost need to kind of flashy stick ourselves and say, okay, like for the technology is moving so quickly, let's just say, hey, what are the desires? Like what are the outcomes? We need to be able to create employment experiences that appeal to the cravings that individuals have. They crave community. They crave a sense of belonging. They want to have a sense that they're progressing in their careers. This is all research that we've done in studies and books that we've published. They crave a sense that they're part of a community that would miss them if they weren't there any longer, and it matters to them that they feel confident in the field. So in many ways, if we were to think about our organizations are going to continue to rely on people, what are the things that are most important when a person is considering not only taking a role in a service-based industry, but remaining in that role for a long period of time? And then we have to consider for how can our learning and resourcing support both those soul cravings and at the same time leverage just this burgeoning technology transformation at the same time. I mean, that occupies a great deal of my kind of focus. And I think it's a very exciting time for learning leaders, but it requires us to, in a sense, think about the let's call it the investments that we've made. Sometimes we refer to those as just the sunk costs of our existing learning assets. We just have to think about how do we consider pivoting those resources to just really make sure we catch this wave, and not get too territorial, because this is a big wave, you know. If one organization is going to invest $3 trillion, that's going to, what's downstream of that is consumer preferences and consumer technology trends that are going to far supersede any stubborn, clinging that I am exerting on the way we've been doing things.
Yeah.
I like that you brought that up too, Leighton, because I think in today's world, I mean, college enrollments have dropped significantly over the last 15 or 20 years. People are leaning more on trade services, and they have a higher expectation now of what it is that they can learn from a trade service employer, because we've seen in statistics as well that people that are graduating with college degrees are having a hard time finding a job that earns them enough compensation, and lets them apply what it is that they spent 4 years learning. And so now people are heavily relying on the trades to teach them a more hands-on skill that is offering a little bit better compensation. And so people are coming into the job interview, or when they're searching job postings, they're looking to see what type of education, continuing education, professional development, even personal development is available in a sense of the training offerings from different businesses, because they need to know that they are going to receive something in exchange for their time and their effort. So I think that's a really good point, just to make in general for business owners and managers is, understanding what you're offering the employee. They're not just there to service us with a sense of the technical skills. What can we give back to them? And again, full circle coming back to what we said earlier was how are we going to help these people develop themselves over time into something greater than when they started? So I think that's a really good point. And I want to like put a pin in that for sure with our owners to say, hey, take some time to really build out what your training and your onboarding and your professional development or your career ladder is going to look like for all your different roles. That way, A, it's a point that you can highlight during the recruiting phase, but B, it's just a way to attract and retain top talent. And so it really starts at how our training begins at how we're projecting the business from the very beginning, all through onboarding the employees to getting them promoted up within the ranks over the years.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And I was just going to say, for anyone who is in the chat while watching this webinar, go to whyworkersquit.com because one of the things we did when we interviewed 400 workers in the restoration industry is we asked them what motivates you to choose this job over that job. And Melissa, it's exactly what you're talking about. It's different generationally, right? You can imagine what motivates a Gen X person is probably a little bit more on the lines of like stability, security, maybe saving up for retirement. Millennials, we can tell you, we broke it down generationally. Millennials are motivated by career growth and they're motivated by community and culture. And they will gladly, maybe not gladly, but like they're willing to take a salary decrease if they see this is how it's going to grow my career. This is a group of people that I want to spend day in and day out with. Gen Z workers, they're less on, important, still important, culture, still important, career growth, but salary, you can imagine going through a pandemic, a recession, everything, all the other exciting valleys and hills we've gone through over the last few years. For Gen Z, that has been a lot of their working experience. And so that really influences, hey, things like salary, things like stability, way more important for Gen Z workers than millennial workers. And you're not going to be able to build a work culture that speaks to the, call it soul cravings, call it preferences, call it whatever you want to your workers unless you understand them first. I think it's a super, super important point.
Yeah, it's really neat to get into kind of the why behind all of the different generations of what it is that they do and what they want to accomplish within a career. We actually researched this, a colleague of mine and I, we researched this recently, and it shows you that like, our parents, for example, like they were able to get a house for pennies on the dollar compared to where our real estate industry is now. And so their goal back then was to find a good job, work there for 20 years, build up your retirement, pay off your home, and have your same job, 9 to 5, and get your paycheck. Whereas now people are really branching out and having more of a focus on, again, what does the employer offer in regards to training and development, benefits, compensation, dollar amount and non-dollar amount compensation. Does the workplace have a pool table versus work from home hybrid 3 days a week? Like those are all things that our younger generations are looking at when they're considering different employment. And so I think it's really neat when you look at that from a higher level with each generation of what's important to them and what motivates them and what their end goal is
Yeah.
when they join an organization and want to build a career out of it.
And for those on this call that are watching this video that are thinking about learning and development, about training, understanding the technology that was available to that generation when they came online is not the right term given the context, but when they were trained up, when they entered the workforce, that's helpful context as far as like how their brain works. How are they trained to be trained, right?
Yeah.
And so you think of Gen X, a lot of it, like you said, Melissa, a lot of it was videos. So it's not uncommon to see a lot of Gen X's like they learn through those instructional videos because that's how they were taught to learn.
Yeah.
I'm a millennial, and 5 years ago, ask any millennial, hey, can you solve this problem for me? Hey, can you get me this information? What are we going to do? We're going to Google it because we were taught that's how you find information is you Google it,
Exactly.
you go out and you search for it. So I still think in keywords. But when you look at Generation Z, they don't think in keywords, they think in questions because they're used to things like talking to artificial intelligence. Maybe their phrases are a little longer as they search on YouTube, as they search on TikTok, things like that. And it totally changes how we interact with training material based on the technology that we had available to us when we were learning and gaining those skills for the first time. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. I saw, I saw my dad go through the transition in our business because, we were around when we went from green and white ledger paper to really old, DOS system and then into the newer age of Dash products and things like that. And my dad really struggled from a sense of, we've been doing it this way for so many years. And then this new stuff's coming out. So how do you take it all in and then completely change what you've grown to know over decades, literally? Um, so I see that struggle in some people now when we're doing our training and things like that. But I do think that the platforms we have and the information that we have, I think it is kind of making that turn now to where the older generations who struggled with it when it first rolled out are now seeing how easy it really is. So I think of like product development over time. Like, of course, when Google first came out, it's probably not near as effective as it is in today's world. ChatGPT wasn't even a thing. But now, as I work with people that are older than me, or even my parents, for example, like they have been exposed to it long enough now to where they're learning and they're starting to utilize those tools more. And it's becoming more of a relief option now because they're seeing it just took them longer to get there. They're seeing now what we all get to positively benefit from as we've learned it, as it's been developed. Google and all the AI driven stuff and how to find answers online and how to use YouTube and things like that. So I think we're making that turn now where it's starting to make sense to our older generations and it's making it easier for them to understand and even connect with their families because now they're able to self-serve. Whereas 10 years ago, every time I walked into my parents' house, my parents were handing me their phone and asking me to fix it. So now they're able to use the technology we have to self-serve.
Totally. Leighton, let me throw you a question. I want to keep this conversation about technology going. Some companies, they see a new innovation, yeah, whether it's AI or maybe social media. I know Facebook had like a work product for a while, and companies are like, hey, we got to get all in on this. This is where the trend is going. Other companies, maybe they take a more, Hutterite approach, and they say, this is all bad. I don't like any of it. And I think most of us would probably say the answer is somewhere in the middle. What's the right balance, in your opinion, Leighton, of like applying the innovation that is happening while still thinking critically about the positives and negatives that all technology comes with?
So in a business, I think it's important that we just land on what are the elements that don't change, right? You could just kind of look on a P&L down to kind of like, let's call it the fixed elements of a business. I mean, regardless of what comes through the front door from a technology perspective, we do our service through the hands and feet, mouths and ears of people. And so that's consistent. That's, sometimes when you're having these conversations about change, we don't emphasize what's not changing, right? What's not changing. There's lots of stuff that's not changing. What else is that so much of the materials and the consumables and the things we pick up from our distributors, like all those things aren't changing. Oftentimes the work sites and not really changing. Um, and good old fashioned customer service, still appreciated, right? Those are the things where, rather than remove, pulling the lever and all of a sudden there's no gravity in the room and our teams think that the whole world is falling. In fact, I think it's important that when you're talking about technological shifts, one of the tools that managers and leaders need to add to their tool belt, one of them I said earlier is, when you're looking at someone's CV or their resume, one of the things I think is going to be one of those outliers is the ability to have a demonstrated ability to build teams. I don't know if my internet's lagging here, but a demonstrated ability to build teams from largely from scratch. Another tool is the ability to be able to communicate effectively strategies that bring change into the organization. Because so much of what I would say is a bottleneck for the opportunity is the ability for you to be a good communicator, to be able to help your teams understand not only what is changing, but what are we trying to unlock for the organization with this change? What's not changing, you know? And then ultimately, what does this mean for us day to day? Um, and that ability to build a communication muscle that helps teams to be able to, in a sense, orient themselves through a change is such an important thing. Is it because we need to learn how to use Grok? No, no, no. It's because what Melissa was describing was, say, two significant transitions, one from paper to digital, as she was kind of logging, job elements, and then, talking about using a physical mobile device. I mean, those were two major transitions. And Melissa, you could have listed a whole host of other ones. I think that what we have to, I hope that the learners leave with, is that we're not just talking about how do we brace for this new, chat AI tool. What we need to brace for is a future where what used to come every 5 to 6 years, a significant transition, the pace is going to be so accelerated that there will be kind of a game-changing technology introduced probably quarterly, if not at least biannually, that is going to hold a tremendous amount of opportunity. And staff are going to walk through our office doors with increased frequency saying, have you seen this? Have you seen this? Have you seen this? So what do you do? My recommendation is that you take some time and you get very clear on what you're very aware of. What are the pains that your business experiences? What are the inefficiencies? What are the aspects of your business where you're unhappy with the operational cost or just the, let's call it the current level of productivity of those areas of your business? Narrow them down to two or three areas and be very transparent with your staff of these are the things that keep me up at night, that create heartburn for me. These are the aspects of the business that I would love to streamline, optimize, or enhance these areas of the business. And so if you have ideas or suggestions or something comes up on your Twitter feed or whatever, I guess X feed, I'm open to evaluating solutions that go after these specific challenges. But if you just don't want to do some kind of drive-by idea grenade and roll it in my office, just don't be surprised if you leave thinking that I'm a kind of a stubborn, resistant to technology leader. So communicating to your team, I recognize that there are a lot of things changing, and I'm going to acknowledge that I am not going to be on the swivel constantly looking out for these solutions. But what I can tell you is we need to find a way to get 10% more margin out of this business. Number two is I don't know how, but we need our project managers to be able to take on at least 25% more dollars under management, or we are just going to have a difficult making the economics work. And the third thing is that we have got to find a way to get people up to speed. It's taken us way too long. It draws on our critical foreman way too much. We need to be able to add an independent layer to how we support people in the field because it's really, really bogging down our leaders. And once again, another manager got picked up by our competitor because they said, "Hey, I don't have to babysit over there." So those are examples of where I think a person, when they're thinking about navigating all this technological change, it's going to only get faster. Learn how to communicate and learn how to be transparent around the bottlenecks that you're aware of in your business and allow your team to, in a sense, bring things to the table. And if you greenlight something, again, I would say enroll them in not only the adoption, but also let's call it the success factors of whatever that technology is. And if it brings a major unlock within your organization and there's a watershed of savings or revenue or risk avoidance, I think that there should be a way to be able to recognize that person and maybe for that even to be recognized in their variable compensation.
Hmm. What
Yep,
I hear,
I do like that. And I just want to add that I think that speaks to the importance of planning and how to like actively follow a plan, right? So every time someone brings us a new feature, we can't continually flip the script on the team and say, oh, we're going to try this now. And then 30 days later, we're changing it again. Like, give these things a shot, right? And get that feedback loop all the way open all the time. That way, your team can constantly update you with what their struggles are and what their wins are with all of the different resources and training type programs. But this, again, I go back to don't lose that human touch. You have to hear what they're saying and let your team be a part of the planning process all the way down to the admin staff or the technician staff. Like everybody needs to be involved in that. We do a really cool exercise at Restoration One. Our parent company is Stellar Service Brands. So each year, our CEO invites all of us into town, and we each get a stack of Post-it notes, and we write down whatever ideas we've had throughout the year or whatever we can think of. And we just go put them on the wall and we assign them into a silo. And that's when we create our plan for that next year of what it is that we're going to implement, what we're going to try, how long we're going to try it for. That way, all of the new things coming out um, aren't distracting us, right? Like you have to give things time to be implemented and to work, and then to have a true testing phase where you can gather accurate feedback before you go changing it up. And I think that especially in our industry, we are a very technological driven industry. There's a platform for everything, or there's an app for that. And I think with all of the new development now, especially with LMS, online learning, e-learning, um, scrolling learning, however you're doing it, there's so many options that it can even become overwhelming. So I wouldn't want to pass that on to a team by any means. Like give them a good solid plan of like, here's what we're going to do, here's how long we're going to do it for. And then if it doesn't work, we'll look at other options. But just having that ability to communicate that is a really good plan for a business.
Yeah, that's so good. What I hear both of you saying is hold with a closed hand your principles and the problems you're trying to solve, and then hold with an open hand the technology that you're willing to use to solve those problems. And
Right.
I think that's such a great way to make sure you don't take your eye off the ball. Even in
Yeah.
the AI discussion, right? We're an AI company, and I see a lot of people be like, well, we got to do AI because AI. And that's a bad reason to do AI. A good reason to do AI is we have to train our workers better, or we have to find this information faster. And I've heard AI could be the best tool to use it, but you're
Yeah.
focused on the problem or the principle, not the technology.
Yeah, and I think too, the question is when you're looking at making these changes or implementing new programs, whatever it or a new idea, whatever it is, you just have to ask yourself, like, how does this feed into our overall mission, values, strategic goals for the year? Like, what silo is this going to go in and within the company, and how is it going to work? But how does it feed up into what we're trying to achieve overall?
Awesome. All right,
One of the things
go for
that,
it, Layden.
if I can make a quick point that might be helpful and practical to individuals. Um, so just imagine, walking into a doctor's office, say your family doctor, and the first thing that you say to them is, "So what do you do?" They'd say, "Well, I'm a medical doctor," and then they just start going on about the benefits of a healthy life and the importance of a balanced diet, and you're like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, okay, I've heard all that," and then you move on. Well, for many contractors and for many individuals, sometimes that is kind of how we approach vendors at things like trade like exhibits and and at the trade floor at different conferences and stuff like that. Is you walk up to something, you kind of look at the copy on their backdrop, and you say, "So what do you do?" Right? And really, what you're creating is a dynamic where a person is just gonna just water hose you with a list of features and pizzazz and
A resume.
pyrotechnics. Yeah,
Mm,
A
and
resume.
it's not going to be as helpful as walking into that doctor's office and saying, "Do you have anything for this?" Right? Or you know what? Routinely, I am feeling indigestion every time I consume X. Right? Or and I'm not saying that sales reps and expo floors are doctors. But what I do know is that a business that knows what keeps them up at night, knows what knocks in the engine, knows what creates friction in their business. And to be able to come up and say, hey, right now we're trying to improve the general productivity of our estimators. Do you fix that? No. All right, thanks for your time. Right? Or, hey, right now we're currently recognizing that we need to be able to better arm and equip just the average person that walks in our business to be able to just harness all of the knowledge we've accumulated over the years so that they can just not look like a dummy in front of the customer. Do you guys have anything to do with that? At the end of the day, when you in a sense kind of show some of your cards and you say, these are I don't know what you do, interesting. But what I do know is these are some of the priorities that we have in our business. To Melissa's point, this is what my team has identified as some important, critical areas of the business we need to optimize for. And that ability to then, in a sense, now put it on the vendor, put it on the person hawking their new thing, with a little bit of onus to say, now you have a sense of what brought me into the doctor's office today. So let's hear it, right? Let's do some diagnosis and prescription here. And it allows everything to just move more efficiently. Allows you to triage all these new tools that are just blowing up on the scene, and for them to say, no, actually, we have nothing related to that. Or they'll say, oh, we got
Mhm.
something coming out in maybe 8 months, but not today. You're like, perfect. Hey, you know what? Here's my card. Why don't you ping me in 8 months, right? So I'll
Mhm.
just say that might be just maybe some practical guidance.
Let's do a rapid fire closing round. We had a great question from JT earlier in the conversation. You want to know, like, hey, if you're dipping your toes in the water with digital training, incorporating some of these modern tools, what's the best way to do that? So I want to use that as a springboard for, like, let's assume people who are attending this webinar, watching this video, they're not going to be able to, like, blow up their training regimen tomorrow based on how impactful this webinar was. What is a good first step? Like, what are some small baby steps, Melissa, that you would recommend taking just to help people walk in the shoes of today's worker a little bit better when it comes to how they think about training and development?
So I would say think back to when you first entered this industry and what is it that you know now that you did not know back then, and start writing it out and get a plan in the business. Get a plan for all of the training for every single role and define out what that process is going to look like. You can whiteboard it, you can write it on paper for right now. Just get it out of your brain and get it onto something, and ask your crews, right? Like, hey, what did you struggle with in the first 30 days? Or what do you know now that you didn't know when on the first day? And get that type of feedback. And then, the next thing is build the plan and implement the plan and be consistent in how you deliver that plan to your team. You want everybody to learn steps 1 through 10. You need to define what those are, define what the resources are to complete those steps, and have everybody experience everything that's related to their role the same as all of their team members around them. And then included in that plan, have a growth plan as well. You need a career ladder plan for all types of training. What is going to motivate that person to get to that next level? How can they earn more? How can they take on more responsibility? What ongoing training do they need to take, even if it's more self-driven than anything, right? Because the learner has to want the information. If you hire someone who has no other goal than to be a water restoration technician, that's their choice and that's fine. But they're going to cap out at some point. But if you have someone who comes in really driven and says, oh, I want to learn all about this industry, I want to be a manager someday. Okay, great. Let's look at what you're going to have to do on your part, on your own self-driven action that's going to help you get to where you need, whether it's internal training or external training, and then stick to the plan, right? And
Hmm.
improve it and change it over time, but stick to the plan. But I think that that's probably the hardest part where people struggle right now is just not even having a plan. So they get somebody in on the first day and they do paperwork and then they say, hey, Joe, take Steve out on the truck with you today and he's just going to shadow you for 2 days. But what does Steve know about the business? What does he know about the missions and the values of what he's expected to show his customers on behalf of the company? So there needs to be a legit plan of how they're going to onboard into the company and then continually learn over time.
Hmm.
And then also keep it simple. Like make these learnings micro learnings, okay? Don't stick them in a room with a TV or a computer all day and have them watch videos for 8 hours. They're not going to learn anything. Micro learning is really, really effective, especially now in the society that we live in. We want everything quick and easy and, easy to get to and easily digestible. So make it really small. Keep your videos small, keep your learnings short, have little knowledge checks in between, but change it up because nobody has good attention spans these days. Hopefully, our listeners today do.
Hey,
But
we're an hour in,
I
so
know. But
props to everyone.
keep it small and easily digestible and not overwhelming. Mix a little bit of that classroom training, team training, written training, online training, and then on the job training and like mix that up a little bit every day and just build out what that schedule is going to look like. So have a plan, have a schedule, and keep it simple.
Awesome. So good. Leighton, parting words of wisdom for our viewers. Send them off with strength for us, please.
Well, Melissa provides so much just turnkey tactile um, advice, right? So maybe let me just say this is that no question, every learning plan, every training development program is so much easier when you have higher caliber people coming into your organization. And higher caliber individuals have optionality and you can really stand out to those candidates by simply leveraging two things. One is find people in your team that no question have grown and developed by whatever method you followed, right? Even if they just kind of figured it out themselves. And present kind of them almost as a case study to say, as you're exploring whether or not my company is the right fit for you, and we're doing the same for you, I just want to just tell you Melinda's story. I just want to talk to you about Raul's story. And I just want to give you a sense, here's just kind of a write up on him or her, get their permission of where they were when they started with us. And now they've been with us for 18 months. They've been with us 24 months. And just in a sense, tell the story of what they have now that they didn't have when they came to the door from life skills, technical ability, confidence, those type of elements. If you have a practice of kind of, putting a photo of your team members up in the hallway, when at their first day and that last day, even just show the confidence that they've developed. But at the end of the day, for young people coming into your company, or really people of all ages, oftentimes, they're coming into your business without a lot of a clear sense of like, okay, so if I give you 12 to 18 to 24 months of my life, like tell me what will I have that I don't have now? And so your ability to communicate in a sense what your business, it's easy to tell you what your business produces from a service or product, but when you could visually demonstrate what you produce in terms of people building, that's very dynamic. I think it's very exciting. And you're able to, in a sense, create more excitement in those high caliber candidates. So as you evolve this program and you implement so much of Melissa's very specific advice, I think is so practical. It's so much easier when you're bringing higher caliber candidates through the door. And I would just close with this: is that what is downstream of just not having a sufficient training program, not being able to develop your team to develop independence and capacities for them to be able to drive, consistent standard-based execution as they're out there on the job site solo. Well, I can tell you, a business that is highly dependent on a small number of people. Folks, let me tell you something you already know. Your health, your marriage, your family, all of them are experiencing the strain of businesses that are too dependent on you. And so really, again, you can even just enlist them, say, hey, I'm thinking about making some changes so I can put my phone away when I come home. Or actually, I don't have to even, look at my computer when I'm on vacation. They're going to be like, we have very high motivation to encourage you in this endeavor. How can we support you? And so I would just consider that if you're experiencing maybe a little bit of reluctance or stubbornness, think about how you can enlist some of the loved ones in your life to say, look, I'd like to be able to kind of leave work at work. And I think to do that, I need to build more capacity into my team. I don't have it all figured out, but I need some encouragement, and maybe even some accountability. So anyways, those are maybe a little bit more softer and squishy, but um, leveraged in the right way, those can be pretty powerful.
Great stuff. Hey, I appreciate everyone for attending today. Thank you to Melissa. Thank you to Leighton for your expertise and perspective, decades of experience here that we hope to share with all of you as we train and equip today's younger workers. Like Leighton said, young workers, they're not going anywhere. We're going to continue to need them in the industry. And so understanding them even better is critical to be able to deliver training that helps equip them with confidence and competence, both out on the job site and in the office. See everyone. Thanks for joining us today, and all the best for the rest of the week.